I used to believe betrayal was loud, a slammed door, a screaming fight, a confession that cracked the room in half. I never imagined it would arrive quietly, hidden behind spreadsheets, automatic transfers, and a bank account I trusted so completely that I never thought to look twice. The house was still new when I found out. The paint smelled fresh. The floors hadn't learned our footsteps yet. We were supposed to be settling into the future, our future, together. I was sitting alone at the kitchen counter, laptop open, a cup of coffee growing cold beside me, when an email notification slid across the screen and changed the trajectory of my life in less than a minute. It was from our financial planner. Polite, professional, neutral, and devastating. Over the past 11 months, nearly $60,000 had left our joint account. Not for emergencies, not for investments, not for us. Transferred quietly, consistently, month after month, into an account that wasn't mine. An account belonging to my girlfriend's brother. I remember staring at the number, waiting for my brain to correct it, waiting for logic to step in and say there had been a mistake, that a zero was misplaced, that I was misunderstanding something basic. But the more I scrolled, the clearer it became. This wasn't a one-time favor. This wasn't occasional help. This was a second household being funded with my income, without my knowledge, without my consent, while we planned a life that assumed that money was still ours. I felt something inside me go very still. Not anger at first, not even panic. Just a deep, hollow realization that the woman I had trusted for nearly 6 years, the woman I planned to propose to in less than a month, had been making decisions about my future behind my back. When I confronted her that night, I expected remorse, maybe fear, maybe shame. What I got instead was a sentence I will never forget. "Family always comes first," she said, like it explained everything. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't just about money. It was about where I stood in her life and how easily I could be moved aside. I'm 29 now, and for most of my 20s, I thought I was doing everything right. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't impulsive. I didn't chase chaos. I chased stability, quiet mornings, predictable bills, a relationship that felt like a home you could come back to after a hard day. That's what Samantha felt like in the beginning. We met at a friend's birthday party when we were still in college. One of those cramped apartment gatherings where the music is too loud, the drinks are cheap, and everyone is pretending adulthood isn't already breathing down their neck. I was finishing my degree in computer engineering, already stressed about internships and job offers. Samantha was studying marketing, laughing easily, talking to strangers like they were old friends. She had this warmth that made people lean in without realizing they were doing it. We talked in the kitchen, away from the noise. I remember noticing how she listened, like she actually cared about the answer, instead of waiting for her turn to speak. By the time that night ended, I had her number saved in my phone and a strange, quiet certainty in my chest that I wanted to see her again. The early years were simple in the way only broke student love can be. We split appetizers. We counted cash before ordering pizza. We watched movies on someone's borrowed streaming password and joked about how one day we'd have a real living room with a couch that didn't come from a thrift store. Samantha was the kind of girlfriend who remembered the small things, how I liked my coffee, which deadlines made me anxious, the exact way I got quiet when I was overloaded, and I was the kind of boyfriend who tried to be steady, who showed up, who planned, who believed that consistency was its own kind of romance. After graduation, my life took off faster than I expected. I landed a job at a tech company as a software engineer, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't calculating every purchase in my head. The pay was good from the start, and I moved up quickly. 3 years into my career, I became a senior developer, and my salary jumped to around $145,000 a year. I remember calling Samantha excited and breathless, like the number might disappear if I said it out loud. She squealed, genuinely happy for me. She hugged me so hard that night I could feel her heartbeat through her sweater, and she kept saying, "We're going to be okay. We're really going to be okay." Samantha's path wasn't as smooth. Marketing was competitive. She took contract jobs, part-time gigs, short-term projects that didn't turn into anything permanent. Sometimes she'd come home exhausted, face tight with frustration, trying to smile anyway. I told myself it was temporary. I told her too. Then, 2 years ago, we had what I thought was one of those mature, grown-up conversations that couples have when they're building a future. We sat at our tiny kitchen table, the one that wobbled if you leaned your elbows too hard, and we talked about how we wanted our life to look. Samantha admitted she was tired of chasing unstable work, I admitted my job had become demanding enough that the last thing I wanted was for us to be drowning in stress on both sides. So we agreed, together, that she would take care of the household while I focused on my career. It made sense on paper. She wasn't making much at her part-time jobs, and I was making enough for both of us. And more than anything, I trusted her. We moved in together 4 years ago, first into a small apartment, then last year into a bigger one. It felt like progress, like we were doing what couples were supposed to do: growing, upgrading, building. That's when we opened the joint account. It didn't feel dangerous, it felt intimate. I deposited my salary there, and Samantha handled everything: groceries, utilities, furniture, little home upgrades that made our space feel warm. I barely looked at the statements, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't feel like I had to. She seemed responsible, organized. And honestly, it was nice to let someone else carry the mental load for once. Samantha would sit on the couch with her laptop, budgeting and paying bills, and I'd kiss the top of her head and say, "Thank you." She'd smile and say, "We're a team." 4 years of that rhythm made it feel normal. So when, 3 months ago, we decided to buy a house together, a 3-bedroom place in a good neighborhood about 20 minutes outside the city, I felt proud. The mortgage was higher than rent, but we ran the numbers. With my salary, we could manage it comfortably. We talked about turning one room into a home office. We joked about how someday the third room might be a nursery. And somewhere in the middle of all that dreaming, I bought a ring. Not because she demanded it, not because I felt pressured, because I truly believed I was about to propose to the woman I'd spend my life with. The only shadow I'd ever noticed, the only thing that made me pause sometimes, was how Samantha talked about family. Not casually, not affectionately, reverently. Like family wasn't just people you loved. It was a law you followed. She had a younger brother, Matt, 24 now. And Samantha adored him in this fierce, protective way that made sense when you heard the stories. They grew up close. Their parents didn't have much money. In Samantha's world, everyone helped everyone, no questions asked. At first, I admired it. I even agreed with it, mostly, because I helped my own sister sometimes too. I believed in support. I just also believed in boundaries. I didn't realize yet that Samantha and I had been using the same word, family, to mean two completely different things. And that one day, that difference would cost me more than money. It would cost me the future I thought we were building. Looking back now, the warning signs were there. They weren't dramatic. They didn't announce themselves. They slipped in quietly, dressed as kindness. It started about 1.5 years ago, when Samantha mentioned, almost in passing, that her brother Matt was struggling to buy diapers for his son. I remember standing in the kitchen, tying my shoes before work, barely looking up when she said it. "Just send him some money," I replied. Of course. It felt obvious, humane, normal. A month later, it was baby clothes, then daycare costs, then a car issue that was temporary. Each request came with a reasonable explanation, delivered gently, always paired with reassurance. "He's just going through a rough patch. Lisa's hours got cut. They're doing their best." And every time I nodded, because we had enough, because it was for a child, because family helps family, right? But somewhere along the way, the requests stopped being framed as requests. They became assumptions. Samantha would mention money she'd sent like it was an update, not a discussion. "I covered Matt's daycare again this month," she'd say while scrolling her phone. "Okay," I'd answer, feeling a small tightening in my chest that I didn't yet know how to name. 6 months ago, that feeling finally found a voice. We were sitting on the couch one night, the TV on, but neither of us watching. I told her, carefully, that I was starting to feel uneasy. Not angry, not accusatory, just concerned. I said we couldn't keep paying for everything for Matt and his family. That helping occasionally was one thing, but covering rent, childcare, and ongoing expenses was another. I told her we needed limits. She didn't argue. She smiled softly, reached for my hand, and said, "I know, it's just temporary. Matt's getting more hours soon. Lisa's looking for better work." I wanted to believe her. So I did. I dropped the subject and told myself that relationships required trust, that micromanaging generosity was ugly, that love meant giving people space to do the right thing. After that conversation, I noticed something else. Samantha became vague. If I asked how Matt was doing, she'd answer broadly, "He's okay. Things are improving." She never volunteered specifics anymore. At the time, I assumed that meant the situation was resolving. Now I understand it meant the opposite. The truth is, I was distracted. Work was intense. The new house came with responsibilities I was still adjusting to. I was thinking about proposing, about rings and anniversaries, and how to ask the question in a way that felt like us. Money was the last thing I thought to worry about. That's the irony that still makes my stomach turn. I trusted her so completely that I never checked the balance. When I finally did, when the financial planner's email forced me to look, it felt like discovering that a house you'd lived in for years had a hidden room you were never allowed to enter. One filled with secrets. Because the transfers weren't small. They weren't occasional. They were methodical. Month after month, large sums moved out of our joint account. Money I earned, money meant for our future, sent quietly to Matt's account while I slept, worked, planned. I didn't know yet what she'd spent it on. I just knew that something fundamental had shifted. That the woman I trusted with our shared life had been making decisions without me, because she knew I wouldn't agree. And the most unsettling part? I didn't know whether she saw that as wrong, or simply necessary. The email came on a Tuesday morning. I remember that detail because Tuesdays had always felt safe, too ordinary to carry disasters, too deep into the week to bring surprises. I opened it absent-mindedly, expecting some generic follow-up from the financial planner. Instead, my chest tightened before I even finished the first paragraph. He was polite, professional, careful with his language, but there was no soft way to say it. Over the past 11 months, $59,842 had been transferred out of our joint account into an account registered under Matt's name. I read it once, then again. Then I opened our bank app and scrolled through the transaction history myself, my hands cold, my breathing shallow, like my body was bracing for something my mind hadn't caught up with yet. There it was, every month, sometimes twice, sometimes more. Large, clean transfers with notes that sounded harmless enough. Support, help, family. My vision blurred. That money wasn't abstract, it wasn't theoretical. It was hours at my desk, late nights debugging code, weekends spent catching up instead of resting. It was the future I thought we were building. Emergency savings, kids someday, a cushion for life's inevitable chaos. When I checked our balance, my stomach dropped. $25,000 left in savings. With a new mortgage, with higher monthly expenses, with no safety net if something went wrong. I sat there for a long time, laptop open, bank app glowing like an accusation. The house was quiet in that unsettling way that amplifies your own thoughts. By the time Samantha came home that evening, I felt hollow. Not angry. Not yet. Just painfully aware that something sacred had been broken without me even noticing. She walked in, set her bag down, kissed my cheek like everything was normal. I waited until we were sitting at the dining table, the same table where we'd talked about our future, about kids and rooms and plans. I didn't raise my voice. I slid my phone across the table. "Can you explain this?" She glanced down, then back up at me, her expression calm. Too calm. At first, she brushed it off. "It's not that much money," she said lightly. "I don't know why he made such a big deal out of it." I opened the email again and read the number out loud. Her face changed. Not guilt, calculation. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. "Yes," she admitted, "I've been sending Matt money." I asked her how long. She hesitated. I asked her how much. Silence. When I told her I already knew, when I said the number again, she finally nodded. She admitted she'd been paying for more than diapers and daycare. She'd covered their rent, their car payments, their insurance, even their date nights, because as she put it, they need to feel normal sometimes too. I stared at her, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "You didn't think to tell me?" I asked quietly. She looked away. "I knew you wouldn't approve," she said, "and I didn't want to fight." That sentence hurt more than the number ever could, because it meant this wasn't an oversight. It was a choice she made over and over again, knowing it would hurt me, knowing it threatened our future, because she believed she was right. I told her this had to stop, immediately. I told her I wasn't saying we could never help Matt again, but that this level of support, done in secret, wasn't okay. She nodded. She apologized. She promised. I wanted to believe her, but the next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification. $1,500 transferred. Reason: emergency car repairs. When I confronted her again, something in her shifted. She didn't apologize this time. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I will always help my brother, no matter what." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a line, and she was daring me to cross it. I didn't yell. That surprised even me. I sat there, staring at the bank notification still glowing on my phone, while something heavy settled into my chest, the kind of weight that doesn't crush you immediately, but presses down slowly, forcing the air out of your lungs, one breath at a time. I asked her to sit with me. Not argue, not defend. Just listen. I told Samantha I felt blindsided, that this wasn't just about money, it was about trust, about partnership, about the fact that she had looked me in the eye for nearly a year, told me everything was fine, and kept transferring thousands of dollars behind my back because she knew I wouldn't agree. She folded her arms, her jaw tight. I already said I'm sorry, she replied, but you have to understand, Matt needed help. I asked her when help became secrecy. She didn't answer that. Instead, she said something that stuck to my ribs like a splinter. If you loved me, you'd understand how important my family is. I felt myself shrink inward. Not because I doubted my love, but because I realized she was using it as leverage. I told her I did understand the importance of family. I reminded her that I'd helped my own sister when she struggled, that I wasn't heartless, that I wasn't trying to cut her brother off. But there was a difference between helping occasionally and fully supporting someone else's family without discussion. I asked her to imagine our future, our mortgage, kids, emergencies. I asked her what would happen if we needed that money. She brushed it aside. We'll figure it out, she said. Money always comes back. That was when fear crept in. Because money doesn't always come back. And trust, once cracked, rarely does. She packed a bag that night. Said she needed space to think. Said she'd stay with her parents for a few days. I watched her zip the suitcase, feeling like I was watching someone quietly erase a life we'd built together. She kissed my cheek before leaving, her eyes glossy but determined. 3 days passed in a blur. She texted me long messages about how she grew up, about how her parents always helped relatives even when it meant sacrifice. She said money wasn't supposed to matter as much as people. I read every word carefully and noticed what wasn't there. No acknowledgement of how much she'd taken. No regret for the act itself, only for the conflict it caused. When we finally met again at a coffee shop near the house, I tried one last time to bridge the gap. I stayed calm, measured. I told her that secrecy was the problem, that transparency was non-negotiable in a partnership, that I needed to know we were working toward the same future. I asked her gently whether she could agree to discuss any future financial help before sending money. She hesitated. Then she said, I can't promise that, especially if it's an emergency. I asked what she considered an emergency. Her answer was so broad it swallowed the entire conversation. When I asked her a question that mattered most, where did I fit into her priorities, she didn't give me an answer that felt like love. She gave me one that felt like a verdict. Family comes first, she repeated. Always. I went home alone that day, walked through rooms we'd chosen together, and sat on the edge of the bed we were supposed to share for years. For the first time since I met her, I wasn't thinking about fixing things. I was thinking about whether staying meant slowly disappearing. Things didn't explode all at once. They stretched. They dragged. They seeped into every corner of my life until even silence felt loud. After that coffee shop conversation, Samantha didn't come home. She stayed with her parents, and for a while, our communication existed only through text messages, long emotional paragraphs from her, shorter, careful replies from me. Every message circled the same point: family, sacrifice, loyalty. She framed it like a moral test I was failing. You're asking me to choose, she wrote one night, and I won't abandon my brother. I stared at the screen, heart heavy, realizing how differently we were hearing the same words. I wasn't asking her to abandon anyone. I was asking her to stop lying to me. A few days later, the outside voices started. Her mother called first. Her tone was gentle, almost soothing, the way people sound when they believe they're being reasonable. She told me stories about how their family had always helped each other, how money moved freely between relatives, how no one kept score. She spoke like this was a cultural truth, something universal that I was selfish for questioning. I listened, I really did. Then I explained calmly that this wasn't about helping, it was about secrecy, scale, and consent. That nearly $60,000 had been sent without my knowledge, money that directly affected my future. There was a pause. Then she said, "But you have such a good job." That sentence landed harder than I expected. Because it reduced everything, my effort, my boundaries, my fear, to a number she felt entitled to reassign. Then Matt's girlfriend, Lisa, texted me. She didn't introduce herself gently. She went straight for my conscience. Without our support, she said, they might lose their apartment. Their son might have to move again. Did I really want that on my conscience? I felt sick reading it. Not because I believed I was responsible, but because I realized how deep the expectation ran. They didn't see my money as mine. They saw it as a resource that had simply stopped flowing. Samantha didn't stop them. She never told them to back off. And that told me more than anything she said directly. When I invited her over one last time, it wasn't to argue. It was to be clear. I laid out conditions, not demands, not ultimatums. Transparency, counseling, a mutual agreement that any financial help to family would be discussed first. I even said we could restructure everything, separate accounts, shared expenses only. I was trying to build a bridge. She listened quietly, arms folded, eyes glossy. Then she said the word that finally cracked whatever was left. Controlling. She said I was trying to control her relationship with her family, that I was turning money into a weapon, that I was asking her to betray her values. We talked for hours, and with every circle we ran, it became clearer that we weren't misunderstanding each other anymore. We were choosing different futures. When I finally said the words, "Maybe we shouldn't be together," she broke down. She cried, she begged, she promised she would try. But when I asked the question that mattered most, whether she regretted sending the money, she shook her head. "I regret hiding it," she said, "not helping them." That was it, because regret for the secrecy wasn't enough. I needed regret for the betrayal, and I wasn't going to get it. The house was never louder than after she left. Samantha moved out by the end of the month, just like we'd agreed. I wasn't there when she packed. I stayed at a friend's place because I didn't trust myself to watch 6 years of my life get folded into boxes without breaking. When I came back, the silence hit me first. Not the peaceful kind, the hollow kind that echoes when something essential is missing. The couch looked bigger without her curled up at one end. The kitchen drawers felt emptier. Some of the utensils gone. The mugs we used every morning separated, like they'd never belonged together in the first place. Even the air felt different, like the house was still holding its breath, waiting for her to come back and finish the sentence we'd started together. I sat on the floor that first night, back against the couch, staring at nothing. I thought about the ring, still hidden in my nightstand, still untouched. A symbol of a future that evaporated before it was ever spoken out loud. I replayed every moment in my head, wondering when exactly I lost control of my own life. When trust turned into negligence. When love became something that could be used against me. And then the guilt crept in. Because even though I knew I'd been wronged, part of me still asked the question everyone else seemed to think was obvious. Was I heartless? Maybe this was just how her family worked. Maybe I was the one who couldn't adapt. Maybe love meant accepting that I would always come second, financially, emotionally, permanently. That thought terrified me more than being alone. A week later, Matt showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting him. I hadn't told anyone where I was that day. When I opened the door and saw his face, tight with anger, jaw clenched, like he'd rehearsed the confrontation, I knew this wasn't going to be calm. He didn't waste time. He accused me of ruining his sister's life, said Samantha was struggling because of me, said they'd relied on that money, and now I'd pulled the rug out from under them. The entitlement in his voice was shocking. I listened until he ran out of steam, my hands clenched at my sides. Then I told him, as evenly as I could, that I wasn't responsible for supporting his family, that I'd helped because I believed in partnership, not obligation, and that if he wanted stability, it was time he looked for full-time work instead of expecting someone else to fund his life. He left angry. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it, shaking. That was the lowest point. Not the breakup, not the empty house. The realization that love had been used to justify exploitation, and that I'd let it happen because I didn't want to seem selfish. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how close I'd come to a lifetime where my work, my future, my boundaries would always be negotiable. And for the first time since everything began, I wasn't grieving the relationship anymore. I was grieving the version of myself who believed trust didn't need verification. The shift didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly, on a Wednesday morning, standing in my kitchen, holding a mug of coffee I'd reheated for the third time because I kept forgetting to drink it. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. For weeks I'd been asking the wrong question. Could I forgive her? The right one was simpler and harder. Could I live like this again? I opened the joint account one last time and scrolled through the history, not to punish myself, but to understand the scope of what I was walking away from. I added the numbers. I mapped the timeline. I looked at how consistent the transfers were, how deliberate. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a single bad judgment call. This was a value system I didn't share. That afternoon, I called the bank and closed the joint account. I opened a new one in my name only. I set up automatic savings transfers, small at first, then larger, like stitching myself back together one decision at a time. When Samantha texted asking if we could talk again, I said yes, but only once more. We met at the same coffee shop. She looked hopeful, fragile, like someone clinging to the version of the story where love fixes everything. She told me she'd found a small apartment, that she was looking for work, that her parents were helping her for now. She asked for another chance. I listened. I really did. Then I asked her the question I hadn't asked before. Do you believe what you did was wrong, or just that it upset me? She hesitated. That hesitation was my answer. When she admitted she still believed helping her brother the way she did was right, something settled inside me. Not bitterness, not resentment. Resolve. I told her we couldn't get back together. I told her I needed a partner who saw transparency as love, not control, who believed that building a future together meant protecting it, not quietly draining it. She cried. She accused. She said I cared more about money than people. I didn't argue, because for the first time, I didn't need to defend my boundaries to anyone, not even her. I offered to help with moving costs, not out of obligation, but because compassion doesn't disappear just because a relationship ends. She moved out 3 weeks later. And that night, alone in the house, I slept through the night for the first time in months. Not because the pain was gone, but because the confusion was, the aftermath didn't come all at once. It unfolded slowly, like dust settling after a collapse, revealing what was damaged, what was gone, and what could still be salvaged. Samantha's parents and Matt came to help her move her things out of the house. I wasn't there. I stayed with a friend again. Not out of fear, but out of self-preservation. I didn't need to witness the final disassembly of something that was already over. When I returned, the house felt stripped but honest. Empty shelves, bare walls, space that no longer pretended to belong to two people with one future. A week later, Samantha asked to meet again. I almost said no, but part of me needed closure that didn't live in text messages. She looked smaller somehow when I saw her, tired, dark circles under her eyes, hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She told me she was sorry. Not the vague apologies she'd offered before, but something quieter, more careful. She said she'd realized she'd crossed a line. Then, almost casually, she admitted something that confirmed every decision I'd made. Matt hadn't had steady work for over a year. The restaurant job, occasional shifts. Most days he stayed home, gaming, hanging out with friends, while Lisa worked part-time and Samantha filled in the gaps with my money. My chest tightened. Not just because she'd hidden the transfers, but because she'd hidden this. She said she hadn't told me because she knew I'd be less understanding. She was right. And that honesty, too late, sealed the ending. I told her gently but firmly that we were done. That trust didn't just fracture, it collapses when deception becomes strategy. She accused me of never really loving her, of using her, of discarding her now that I had a house and a good job. Those words hurt, but they didn't stick. Because I knew the truth. I hadn't asked her to sacrifice herself, I'd asked her to be honest. After that, I cut off contact. Blocked her number, blocked her social media. Not out of spite, but because healing requires distance. Matt showed up once more, angry, demanding, still convinced I owed him something. I asked him to leave. He did. That was the last time I saw either of them. Over the next weeks, the ripple effects became visible. Without my financial support, Matt had to adjust. Lisa picked up more hours. Bills got paid differently. Or not at all. None of that was my responsibility anymore. At work, I threw myself into projects. I tracked my finances meticulously. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted from, people who didn't see my boundaries as selfish, but as necessary. And slowly, without drama or revenge, something else happened. The narrative changed. People stopped asking why we broke up. They started saying, I get it. Not loudly, not publicly, but enough. And that was enough for me. 3 months have passed since everything ended. Not enough time to forget, but enough time to see clearly. Life has settled into a rhythm that feels quieter, sturdier. I rebuilt my savings little by little. I set boundaries not just with money, but with my time, my energy, my expectations. I learned to check my accounts regularly, not out of fear, but out of respect for myself. About a month ago, I received a handwritten letter from Samantha. Not a text, not an email, a letter. She wrote that she'd found a full-time job at a marketing agency, that she was standing on her own again. She thanked me, not for the breakup, but for forcing a reality she'd avoided. She admitted she'd been wrong to hide the money and wrong to assume love meant unlimited access to someone else's future. She didn't ask to get back together. She just wanted me to know she understood now. I didn't respond, not because I was angry, but because closure doesn't always require a reply. I ran into Lisa once at a grocery store. It was awkward, but civil. She told me Matt had found full-time work in construction, that supporting themselves had been hard, but necessary. She apologized for the message she'd sent me months earlier, said fear had made her desperate. I believed her. As for me, I got promoted to team lead. The responsibility is heavy, but it feels earned. I turned one of the spare rooms into a home office. I repainted the walls. I made the house mine. I've started dating again, slowly, carefully. And early on, I talk about the things people usually avoid. Money, family, boundaries. Not because I'm guarded, but because I'm honest now. Here's what this experience taught me. Love without transparency isn't intimacy. It's risk. Generosity without limits isn't kindness. It's erasure. And shared futures require shared values, not silent sacrifices. Some people will say I chose money over love. They're wrong. I chose trust. I chose partnership. I chose a future where love doesn't require disappearing. And I would make the same choice again.